your policy brief on the macroeconomic effects of the Build Back Better framework certainly has gotten a lot of attention. Could you walk us through some of the key findings?
Sure. This focuses on the White House version of the Build Back Better reconciliation framework. And then the House has made some modifications in potentially in response to some of our revenue estimates, and as well as some other changes. So the White House Build Back Better framework goes through a whole list of kind of different spending programs, everything from childcare, preschool, home care, clean energy, as you mentioned, ACA subsidies, some Medicare hearing benefits, housing, and so forth. And so then what it does is it then finances some of that with various revenue initiatives, including the minimum tax and corporate book income, tax and stock repurchases, international tax changes, a surcharge on high income households, and some other changes, including some IRS funding to try to get a greater compliance. And so essentially, they put out an estimate of how much revenue they were going to get from that. We did a line-by-line comparison, and based on our framework that includes lots of interactions that's really tied to data, we estimated a lower amount of revenue, about 1.5 trillion over 10 years, whereas they were closer to 1.9 trillion over 10 years. So the House has done some changes on the revenue side, as well as some of the spending side, and we'll be releasing our analysis of the House version probably within a day.
Oh, good. How are the comparison with the spending? You're spending a model versus what the White House was assuming.
Yeah, I mean, so most of the spending programs are dollar denominated already. So those are not going to change a tremendous amount. It is true, some of them are program denominated. So that means they don't necessarily have a specific price tag on those. So what we do is we use our own model for some of those, some of the premium tax credit, which is some of these Affordable Care Act subsidies, the child tax credit, the earned income tax, things like that. So if it's specified as a program without a specific dollar amount, then we use our framework, which is highly integrated. It gets all these interaction effects. Sometimes they are very first order. And so we capture that from our framework. And then if they are dollar denominated, obviously that's just dollars and there's no disagreement on those. And so the spending side is not really, at least as the law as written, there's not a huge disagreement on that part. I mean, there is some disagreement in terms of, kind of smaller things, but in terms of, we estimate the spending to be about 1.87 trillion as written. Of course, what is the issue with reconciliation bills is that they often are trying to target a deficit total over 10 years driven by the Byrd rule, which is specific to these reconciliation bills. And so one way of targeting that, we saw this also during the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, is that certain programs will be made temporary for a couple of years in order to hit that 10-year target. So we also do what we call an illustrative permanent spending scenario, which says, suppose that those programs do not suspend, that is, that they are renewed throughout the budget window. And in that case, the cost is slightly more than doubles. It goes from our estimate of 1.87 trillion in spending over 10 years for the the White House version of the legislation as written, to about 4.2 trillion under this illustrative alternative where all the spending is made permanent during the 10-year horizon. And so just to be very clear, our official score is of legislation as written, but it's not surprising a lot of policymakers want to know what the price tag may be if in fact the spending programs were in fact not made temporary, but were made permanent eventually.